Today we're going to be continuing our discussion over shooting deaths, and primarily we're going to be focusing on ballistics itself. So that means firearms. So when we talk about this, the most important thing that we want to focus on when we first get to the scene is going to be documenting the firearm. And that doesn't mean just making sure that we know where it is or what type of firearm it is, but we want to document the location of the firearm itself. So where is the firearm in conjunction to the body or the crime in itself? So documenting the firearm, one, we want to take pictures firstly before we move anything. So if it's already been moved, sometimes that happens. One, because the job of the first responders is always to make sure that the victims have been moved to safety or if they are still alive. So if that firearm has been moved, you want to ask the first responders where the gun was whenever they arrived to the scene. Was it in the decedent's hand? Was it near the decedent? Or did the suspect have the firearm on them when they fled the scene or when they were captured? So we want to know what type of firearm that it was and who has it currently. And if someone else has it currently, is it already in evidence? And if so, can we get pictures of it ourselves, or will they send those pictures to us later on? Now, in the instance that the firearm is still on the scene, that's actually perfect for us as an investigator because we get to document it ourselves. Me personally, I always like to document things myself because I knew I got it right myself every time because I like to take a million pictures at every scene. It's always better to have more pictures than not enough pictures because you can't go back to that crime scene again. You got one try and that was it. So when we took pictures of a firearm at the scene, we always made sure that we took, like I said before, pictures from the crime scene as a whole from the outside and you work your way in. Now you want to make sure when you do decide to move the firearm that the firearm is safe. So number two, when securing the firearm, of course there are a lot of different types of firearms and sometimes you get some exotic types or sometimes they're modified. So you need to be educated in the field that you're working in. If you're going into investigations, you need to know the types of firearms that you're working with. So I have my own that we're going to demonstrate with. So currently I have a Glock 9mm and this is going to be a Glock 19 Gen 4. So as many of you know, and if you do not know, that is okay, that Glocks do not have a safety. Technically, anything that's going to be a type of defensive type gun, the safety is going to be the trigger. So if you do not put your finger on the trigger, the gun should technically be safe. But what we want to do first is put our finger on the magazine release button. That's going to drop our magazine load. Okay, so once we drop that magazine load, okay, we'll have our magazine round. However, most semi-automatic firearms are going to automatically load a new cartridge casing or live round into that chamber. So we have to pull back the slide and make sure there's no new live round into that chamber. So as I'm showing you guys there's no new live round into that chamber. From that point on, that firearm is then safe to then document by taking pictures. Now that I have secured my firearm and it is safe to document, there are a couple of things that we specifically note from this particular firearm or any firearm on scene. And so we want to make sure, one, that we get the type of manufacturer and the make and model of the type of gun that it is. So I'm going to flip this around and show you. So we have a Glock, okay, and then the make and model of this type of firearm, and it's 9mm. All right, and then we have the serial number. This is in a couple different places on this particular firearm. It's going to be up underneath here, underneath the slide, and then on the other side of the slide here. Some other things that we also notate are the inside parts of the barrel. So on the inside part of the barrel, we have rifling. Rifling is very important to ballistics because the rifling leaves what we call lands and grooves on the projectile. Lands and grooves that are left on a projectile are almost like fingerprints are to any type of person, okay, they are going to be able to match back to that particular firearm. So whenever we are able to find a projectile, sometimes they might help you lead to a matching of a firearm, or say or rule out that it's not that firearm that was found at that scene. So hey, look elsewhere, or maybe we can put that into NIBIN, the national system. And so sometimes we can send that off to NIBIN, so ATF can tell us, hey, we have a match for you, that gun was involved in another scene, and then they can help us out with a match for that too. Now, the purpose for rifling in the first place is just for accuracy. It's like throwing a football. So when you have a high pressured weapon that is shooting this little tiny ball as fast as it can down this barrel, you want it to have this spiraling so that once it comes out of the end of this thing, it's not toppling over itself. So it has a spiral so that it comes out as accurate as it can. So you want it coming out straight, okay? We don't want it toppling over. If the inside of this was smooth, okay, and it came out smooth instead of spiraling, it would topple over. All right, something else that you might see that could be a little alarming when you get to scenes. I have had an instance before where I have had a cartridge casing on a scene that did not match the firearm. So for example, this was a case where there was a 45 caliber casing that was from what you would say a 1911 45, and it was put into, the barrel was put into a 40 Smith & Wesson firearm. Now, I did not know that at the time, and we thought that there could have possibly been another firearm involved. Now, it takes a skilled individual to be able to replace the barrel of the gun and put it into another firearm. And you may ask, why does someone do that? Now, there are a couple different reasons. If you've never shot a 45 caliber weapon, it has a very hard kick. So for one, it helps with accuracy. So if you're putting a larger caliber weapon, or a larger caliber projectile, I should say, into a smaller firearm, it's still giving you your bang for your buck, and it's a lot easier to control, so it should be more accurate. Now, when continuing on, when we're talking about cartridge casings as well, one thing that we have to remember when we're looking for them is that the majority of firearms have their ejector ports on the right side of the firearm, okay? So as that cartridge casing is cycled through the gun, the ejector is going to grip onto that casing, and it's going to eject out of the right side and fling that up over your head. Now, it does that because it gets really hot in here, okay? And then that casing, of course, is going to heat up as well. So it's trying to fling it up and over your head. And now it does that because the majority of people, 90% approximately of the population of the world, are right-handed. So that makes sense that most firearms are created for right-handed individuals as well. So in saying this, approximately 10% of the guns that have been manufactured are for left-handed people. So if you approximately know maybe where the suspect was standing at the time of the shooting, or maybe where the deceased individual possibly had shot themselves at the time, and you know where the firearm is, and you know that they were right-handed, you should be able to have a rough estimate of where that casing should be found. So in saying this, I'm giving you a lot of statistics, and you're like, well, how many firearms is that then? Okay, well, there's a lot of firearms out there. Approximately, they say there's like 13 million firearms in just the United States alone. Okay, that's just a rough estimate, and they're saying that's probably just legal ones. I don't know, maybe 506 million in the world, and that is just up to 2023. So I think tens of millions get made every year. So that number is even higher now as of 2026. So far, what we have covered is documenting the firearm, securing the firearm, barrel swapping, ejecting ports. And then I just want to circle back quickly on finding the cartridge casings. Now, sometimes you are the last person on scene if you are a death investigator. So you have a lot of people that have been through your scene before you get there, which means that your evidence has been tampered with. Now, if you're looking for a cartridge casing and you have been looking for hours and you cannot find it, you might want to reach out to your first responders who have been there. Now, if you know, a lot of first responders have a lot of treading in the bottom of their boots that like to pick up things like rocks or maybe sometimes some cartridge casings that like to fit in between those boot treads. So I know this maybe by some personal experience. So you might want to reach out to them and see if they might have some casings in between their boot treads. So just a little note for you all. One other note about cartridge casings is, again, you need to know your weapons. So if you're not familiar with your firearms, you have to know that revolvers are not going to spit out cartridge casings because they have a cylinder. So cylinders have to be manually ejected. So remember, cylinders can have 5 or 6 casings inside of them, and then you have to manually eject that port. So all of your casings hopefully should still be inside that cylinder whenever you check that firearm.